Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Konstantin. I'm pleased to be here with you in this closing session. And I'm thankful to the organizers who asked us to give a talk on the issues we are dealing with every day. One of the areas we are working on is public understanding of science. And closer to the issue of the conference is a topic related to trust. But I would like to say that this is not a kind of a finalized research. You will not find here any final conclusions. I would say that this is a kind of sketches for our reflection on the topic, coming from the daily observations. With an attempt to bring a cross-national perspective and to think whether it will help us to see something new, something more than we had observed using the national data. I will start with the quotation from the Royal Society at the end of the 20th century, which brings us to the perspective of the very important high role of science in our daily life. We can find science everywhere, all before your laptops, your mobile phones. It helps us to solve the daily problems, to protect from national disasters, or as British say, increasingly competitive environment. And it also influences a lot on the way we think, on our picture of the world, on the tendencies, on the way of argumentation and so. This is a belief that arises, I would say, from the after the Second World War, when science gets extremely huge amount of money, and it requires some explanation, some justification for this money. And the movement of public understanding starts. But the science brings with its development not only positive things. It also brings new identities, new opportunities and new risks, new questions or ethically controversial issues, and new difficulties when you try to adopt some science and coming out of science technological solution to the data. So if we take a look at the overall evolution of the studies of science, we can see that it started from the so-called idea of the deficit of knowledge, when scientists themselves tried to explain what actually they are doing. And depending on the general understanding by lay public of what kind of science is, they saw a perspective to justify their role in the society. Following this path, other scholars joined and moved towards some other ideas related to the public understanding of science. So if you understand what science is, how it works, so what do you think it is doing? So how do you see its role? What's your perception? What's your attitude towards this activity? The next wave, starting from the mid-90s, proposed that this is not the end, actually. Understanding what science is doing means accepting somehow potential benefits and risks. That means that you might either accept it or participate, changing it. So the new idea of public dialogue, science or the public dialogue, appeared. In different studies, you may find different explanations to this, or different forms of science-society dialogue, or science-society or public engagement in science and technology. But anyway, the trend is that scholars start thinking of how science communicate with. Going specifically to the idea of trust, what do we mean by saying that? So what's that trust in science? We can start from some personal trust to one or another type of we are talking to. For example, like trust between a doctor and his patient, or it could be generalized institutional trust to the science as a social institute. So the evolution shows that there are different characteristics of that. Starting from the reliance on those who have responsibility for making decisions, or positive attitudes, or readiness to critically at science, to accept risks related with its development, and in the end, willingness to be engaged in the development of scientific projects. How could this be measured? In fact, there are lots of indicators available in the cross-national perspective. Here we identified three, I would say, key blocks of indicators that you could easily find as the data is open in Eurobarometer study, in the regular reports of US National Science Foundation. Recently, I think from 2014 or 2013, OECD joined this initiative and started publishing cross-national comparisons on public attitudes to science. And we just have some figures here in Russia. I will show how they are. So these three blocks are basic expectations. So what do we wait from, what do we expect from science? The risk perception and sensitivity to rapid changes that are associated with science and technology development. And finally, the willingness to attitudes towards regulation and willingness to participate in decisions make about science and technology. So, does lay public trust in science? And, can we assert that science motivates people to take risks of the development? So again, the same box of indicators plus specific group related to public participation. We extracted these indicators from the already mentioned Eurobarometer report and added some data on Russia. So the further pictures are just some illustrations on what can we see among Europe. No information about other regions, unfortunately, is not available by now, but that's the perspective for the future studies. So, comparing risks and benefits. Questions on whether science makes our life easier and better, or it brings together some unforeseen side effects on environment and health. We can see that the groups of European countries are more or less consolidated here, and they are both accepting the potential benefits and risks. So certain level of ambivalences. If we go further and take the same question on the benefits against not health and environmental issues, but against ethical issues, the picture changes. The situation in terms of cohesion between countries is more or less the same, but the level of importance of ethical questions is significantly lower than in the case of health and environment. We might propose that the explanation will be this: the closer the science influences, the closer science is to your body, to your personality, to your environment, the more risks you can identify and take into account. So the more important certain decisions or certain discoveries are becoming. This is the application of science and technologies that makes people work more interest. So it's attitude towards new developments of science against its sensitivity to the lifestyle change. So you see again almost the same situation here. And finally, the willingness to control. So if science brings risks, should it be controlled and how? And we can see here that surprisingly to us, the overall level of the willingness of most European countries to control scientists is around average. So again, there is no big differences. There are some, I will tell about it later, but there is no idea of total control or absolutely absence of this control. So just to sum up these pictures, we can say that the majority of population in the countries we observed, first of all European countries plus Russia, acknowledges the ambivalent nature of science and technology. That means accepting both risks and benefits. And more than half of the analyzed countries in the sample tend to perceive science critically. But as I said, the closer risks related to science to your physical value to your life, the more you are aware of the scientific issues. And finally, public understanding of independence of scientific work or need for regulation is also ambivalent. This might be attitude driven on the one hand from the ideological view on science, on its role, on its importance, and on the other hand on the pragmatic aspects, what it really is, whether the inputs for first the financial inputs are approved with the results. So people believe in progress, and they don't want to. They understand the risks, and they want to take it. So whether they are ready to participate, can we say that tomorrow we will join scientific community, try to push some issues or stop some controversial studies? This is an index of participation. We constructed on the use of one question, depending on the agreement of how population should be engaged or not engaged in the discussing scientific related issues. You can see that in fact the final figures are very common for many countries. So the difference between the certain countries are not so big. Another visualizations for the same index. In fact, if we look at the axis, we can see now that this is the only, I would say, picture that shows. In fact, we can identify some northern European countries, such as Sweden, Denmark, UK, plus Germany, who are more interested and more aware of public engagement in science. So this population of these countries are likely to be more informed and more engaged in decision making of science. On the other hand, we have some, I would take a risk to say that there are partially some post-Soviet, like Latvia or Hungary, Czech Republic, plus some smaller European economies such as Belgium, Netherlands, and Italy, who share the indifference to the southern region and Valentina, surprisingly, who show their indifference to these issues. Again, public opinion on the necessity of the dialogue is accepted by most of the public countries. However, among the Eastern Europe and Northern Europe, countries almost for half of the population distance themselves from the scientific issues and distances from the communication. People tend to choose the passive forms of involvement. They are ready to be informed, but they want to delegate the right to take decisions to the scientists themselves or some authorities. Some countries that demonstrated a very high degree of risk sensitivity. First of all is France and Russia. At the same time, do not show the highest degree of participation. So they are really aware, but at the same time they didn't want to participate, which is and at the same time, some countries already mentioned with low sensitivity have higher score of participation. We read correlation analysis, just to show you with here in the bold marked those ideas that are somehow correlated to each other. And this preliminary correlation analysis shows that this idea of the autonomy of science is negatively associated with the culture of public participation. So potential side effects of human health and environment are key drivers to public participation, not the risk perception. So the risk sensitivity does not stimulate any dialogue. It breaks up the communication. So positive attitudes towards science and scientific development inspire people to participate. Some concluding remarks. So public trust in science when discourse about science is structured around some new developments, new opportunities, new potential benefits. When people do understand the ambivalence of science and ready to accept both risks and wait for new potential benefits. At the same time, we can say when we start talking about risks, we may break this dialogue between science and society. And in the end, we should remember that science and society dialogue is not a recognition, but is also a consequence of the already existent level of public engagement. What's next? As I said, these were some preliminary ideas on how this topic will be covered. We started to search for new indicators that would be helpful to explain the differences between countries. And we are now also trying to find more countries to be included to the sample. Because factors that are standing behind these attitudes are economical, cultural, social, and so on. And without these variables, we cannot understand what's actually going on. I think this is the end. I will keep you informed. If you have any questions, please ask them now or drop me a message. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Konstantin. Very interesting presentation. So, yours, no, discussants first, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, it's embarrassing to speak with a microphone just this 1 meter between me and you.
It's like that.
This is indeed, I want to quote Margarita, this is another totally provocative speech which pushes the previous talk a step further towards a better understanding of what shapes the relationship between lay people and academicians. I think it is a very sensitive topic because it goes towards the issue of what shapes, what are the determinants and the consequences of trust in science. We know that this kind of values or attitudes are not crystallized. They changed a lot and they change rapidly in various societies in different ways. For example, the first thing that comes to my mind is that people's confidence in science might be shaped in the short term by the business cycle or by great political and social events. It would be interesting to go further and to check how confidence in science changed based on these big events. In the long term, here we study a lot of values. We know that this kind of confidence might undergo deep changes when moving from materialist to post-materialist society. It raises the issue of how new media can shape confidence in science, and how also the democratization of the information, that is to say, you partly were referring to this, how the fact that people manage to access more or less easily the scientific information, how this shape the attitudes towards it. So these are all very important topics that raise question. On the basis of what you have seen, in your opinion, what can be done to increase the trust in science? Of course, I don't expect definitive answer on this, maybe just a speculation. Another thing that I would suggest is to look at not only at the levels, but how this variable has changed over time. For example, there is an interesting paper on another topic, on social capital, written by Chernovich and Gersani. I hope they will forgive my pronunciation. Where they show that there is a consistent gap in social capital between Eastern and Western Europe. And we also know that this gap is mirrored in differences in trends of social capital. I'm wondering, does this help true also for confidence in science? And should we be worried about what happens to confidence in science over time? Yeah, I would say these are some first reactions I got to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For me, it's not. I have a couple of things about this quite interesting presentation and paper. And I'm not from this. I'm coming from policy organization, and for us, we are more involved in decision making and promoting different policies rather than in pure science. But from my point of view, one big question is this endless search for one head economist. You know that, I don't remember who it was, one president of the United States, he told, well, give me one head economist, because this bloody economist all the time say on the one hand, on the other hand. And I think this is one of the biggest gaps between science and policy making. If you read typical scientific paper, you will end up with unless circumstances ABC, take into account controls ABC, we could consider that with probability of X%, this happens. What it means for people? What it means for policymakers? What should we do? I think this is the biggest question, and without breaching this gap, trust in science could suffer further. That's one thing. I don't have ready answer for this. We ourselves suffer from this, and we are trying different methods how to deliver our message in coherent way, without compromising quality, but getting more understanding. So that's one big comment. Second, I noticed quite interesting thing in the chart you show about public consultation. If you look share of those who are actively insist on consulting people, and share of those who say, no, we should not consult it at all, these dark sides, they are very small, right? And my assumption would be that those who insisted on consulting, well, that's a question why they insist on consulting. Most probably, and this is my speculation, that science contradicts their beliefs, right? So, and if you look, most vocal and most active groups, that were groups driven by different beliefs. Right? So the question is how we should construct relationships with these groups. For instance, in Moldova, believers, they run very big campaign against codification. Each citizen voted his personal code, which simplifies things a lot. And they don't know. We don't want to get this personal code because we think we could get 3666 in this code. So it was resolved very fast and efficient because this office which issued this code, they told we modified algorithm in such a way that we assure you cannot get this. And it's calmed down. But there's a big question how we could ensure these things and how we, and if it's completely not compatible, this science with these beliefs, what we should do. And I think it's a big question for discussion. Last but not least, these were macro things, and you deal with averages. But it could be interesting to see what are the distributions. So average here could be a result of very big spread in opinions, but it could be result in very narrow spread in opinions. And it would be interesting to see distribution of these. Thank you very much once again for very interesting presentation.
Konstantin, you want to react immediately?
Well, if there are no questions, I will. Thank you very much for your questions. I will start from the end. Unfortunately, we do not have access to the micro-level perspective. We can only say, I can give you only evidence on, for example, Russian data, because we deal with a lot of this, and we have published some results. Of course, this is a shortcoming of the availability of the databases. But I hope that large-scale international surveys, maybe the one like World Radio Survey, could bring us more understanding on the patterns, on the factors that influence certain attitudes towards science. From the perspective of the national data, and this might be a partial answer to the question of the previous discussion, what is actually how the dialogue and who are the people trusting or mistrusting science. I can point out that in terms of bringing bridge between the gap, building the bridge between the science and society is strongly related not only engaging not only these two sides. That means that also policymakers, businessmen, journalists, and other groups should be also engaged in the process. Because there is no universal form. The new media that actually, like for example, scientific bodies, they engage you actively in looking at how science brings up some argumentation. So science in action, it is done in public. So it can help you to have a better understanding of what is going on and how it's happening. But I cannot say that this can actually be a universal solution for the bringing up this dialogue. This is a very complex and controversial topic. Of course, we continue our search with regards to your recommendations. They were very valuable. Thank you very much for this. And well, I hope that, well, in the nearest perspective, we can at least approach to some answers. So not to give them for sure, but I think I managed to figure if there's some question left, I think I can send more, or you're satisfied with.
I think
Okay.
maybe you want to collect questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a couple of minutes left, and I want to collect them now. Please, short questions. No co-lecture.
Okay, a couple of them. Thank you very much. The topic is fascinating, but maybe you would like to address some of the issues later. For example, I would not say that I'm completely convinced by your theory behind the lineup of your countries, because I saw Montenegro on one hand of it and Slovenia on the other, on the opposite side, and well, no theory provided for that. Also, just a small remark, but you know, to be on the same page, I think Italy is twice as big as the Russian economy. So it is not one of the smaller, Italy, yeah, it's not one of the smaller European economies. And you know, one idea which may sound absurd, but on the other hand, I think there is some logic. Maybe you would like to compare, you know, how much people trust religion and science, because these are two different worldviews, as they say. And also, personally, I doubt a bit that people really, you know, can make can judge critically what science produces. But you know, comparing these two very ambitious worldviews would be maybe interesting. Thanks.
Eduard.
Yeah, I would like to, I don't need a mic. I would like to amplify this. I presented my study of suicide in the United States. I was focusing mainly on religion as the independent variable, but I didn't report, but I also found a negative correlation of suicide with beliefs in science. So if you belong to a sect where they don't believe in evolution, that increases. So this is something major. So yeah, I would try to build an index of believing in science versus believing in magic, something like that, and could be an interesting, perhaps a better, a more understandable picture.
Any more? Okay, question is closed. Konstantin
Just
again.
a short answer. I cannot agree more with your comments with the questions. We need variables. We need indicators to calculate and to index. And we continue our research. So as for the sample, it is very narrow. We did not constructed it for a special purpose. We just, for this preliminary study, we just looked at the available data and collected everything that was available. There's more. Yeah, I hope. For some indicators, yes. And I think that for the deeper analysis, what we need and what we will do, we will construct a sample based maybe on some polar cases, as you suggested, taking different economies, taking different cultures. So thank you again. Yeah, we'll